Dear learners, today we are going to talk on sustainable development. In last videos, we have already talked about the basic of sustainability, how the term sustainability was evolved. And we learned that the word sustainability might be we are using as a new word, but if you look into the concept and how it was evolved, the issues of sustainability was with the human civilization since agrarian energy crisis. And in one of the videos of lecture by Professor Swaminathan, you have learned that why we need to study sustainability science. And sustainability science is the science of sustainable development in a very simple language. So, let us try to explore what does the term sustainable development means. Nowadays, this word has become, particularly this term sustainable development has become one of the important theme whenever you talk about different strategies, planning, processes. Even as a scholar or as a research scholar, as an academic, whenever we explain something, we usually use the term or we try to bring this term sustainable development. During COVID-19 issues, global pandemic, most of us are able to understand the interrelation between different components of the society. Right. So, when the term comes in our minds, the first question comes to us is what to be sustained, for how long, what's to be developed. This question at the end of the lecture you will be able to get the answer or some idea about this question. If we look into the history and the concept of sustainable development, we know the term emerges in this modern world, especially from 1960s onward. And the root to the concept of sustainable development was basically introduced into the development discourse during 1970s. The UN Conference on the Human Environment that was taken place in 1972 at Stockholm brought this concept in the international arena. And if we look into the logical term, this logical term sustainable development was introduced in the world of literature, or we can say in academic literature, by World Commission on Environment Development in its report Our Common Future in 1987. It is an attempt of the international community under the umbrella of the United Nations to combine the growing concern about a range of environmental issues with socio-economic. Even the term was logically introduced in the academic literature. A number of publications has discussed about the possible impact of environmental degradation and the need for a way, or the need to find out a way for the sustainable development, a development which is to be sustained. Few of the publications like an essay on the principle of population by Malthus in 1978, then Limits to Growth published by Club of Rome in 1973. In their publication, it was mentioned that the gloom and the doom predicting the dire consequences of population explosion, that talks about the human population explosion across the globe is going to affect the resource crunch. Then another publication by World Watch Institute in 1974, author Lester Brown, he is also one of the leading Malthusian. In his publication, it provided that they given a warning that there will be a collapse, possible collapse of global use of natural resources and the environment because of the population explosion that is happening. Then, in this annual State of the World series and associated working papers by Brown, it is these publications has become one of the important steps in development of the concept of sustainability, especially even in 1972 when the Stockholm Conference was happened, or the then our Prime Minister of India, Srimati Indira Gandhi, is one of the head of the states who attended that conference. She talks about the relation between poverty and environment degradation, and he raised this one of the issues of our future threats. So the point is that the malnutrition concept that projected or the reckless consumption would lead to serious detrimental consequences to the human population in the future. But Mr. Bosserov in 1981 argued that the other side malnutrition concept said that the reckless consumption by human will lead to a serious detrimental consequence to the degradation of the environment or resource crunch. But Bosserov argued that this increase in population pressure will inspire development of new technology to compensate for the increasing demand, because human knowledge are developing, and we have that human have that characters that we try to find out one or other alternative. That assumption was also reflected by Bosserov argued. She again argued also that the increase in population leads to development that finally leads to a decline in the increase in population. That means when we have the issues, we will find out a technology or we will try to limit our population. But unfortunately, we know, we have experienced that population has increased in geometric way. Now we have crossed 7 billion. The enormously rapid depletion of resources across the world and degradation of environment is continuously happening in most part of the world. Then, when we look into the way we are, the human are, lifestyle, the way we are having, and technology we are talking about, from that point of view, we can look into the impact. One of the relationship proposed by American environmentalist Paul Ehrlich, he suggested that impact is equal to that multiplication of population, affluence, and technology. And it is one of the useful way of looking at the impact of these three relations, that is population, the affluent lifestyle, and technology. Because when population, we talk about population, that the way consumption, per capita consumption is very important. Even technology per capita is important. And all these factors constitute some of the major influence on the impact. So based on, I look into, I am bringing only few of the important publication over here. So based on those important publication, it is observed that the natural resources are finite, the technology has limitation, population is increasing. So when we have an understanding that the increasing population is affecting or degrading the quality of the environment, quantity of the resources, then in one side it is also argued that the technology has also limitation. So as far as human is in this living planet, and to support our own society, we should have a way of development. So what is the term development means? Let us have a quick look into that. Most people of the world think that or understand that development either as a progress towards modernization with that of Western line, means or economic growth towards the NP growth. Say for example, when as a citizen, as a person from a developing world or underdeveloped world, when we talk about development, we talk about the lifestyle, the modern lifestyle, the affluent lifestyle, the conservative lifestyle of the European nation. This is the way of our understanding of development. But the reality is that whatever we're talking about, the think or understanding on the concept of development, and it is true that the development takes place at the cost of the environment. And when development is taken place, then we know that it has effect on the environment. So development is also required to support our society. Then how to do that? And that's why sustainability needs to be maintained. So sustainability is a general term to bridge the gulf between this development and environment. And it's very common that the conflict of space and time in development still exists around the globe. Then, what development has brought to us? Because of, as we also discussed in the last videos, last class, when we discussed about sustainability, the growth of economics, it brought, in other terms, the indifference in social equity, environmental quality and economic development are the key output of development. It may be either inter and intra-generational, rich and poor nation, or rural and urban. The development needs to be balanced in all these dimensions, and in this way, the concept of sustainable development was involved. So, as per the definition of World Commission on Environment Development, sustainable development is defined as the development to meet the needs of present generation without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. So, the definition may have some backdrop or some limitation, but the reality is that we need to bring a way of development that maintain the balance between environment and society. So, what are the basic principles of sustainable development then? There are a number of principles proposed by different authors, different organizations. Let us look into only few which are very important and relevant, particularly in this course. Few of them are the three-pillar triangle basic model of sustainability, cultural diversity as central pillar of the sustainable development, the capital stock model is basic principle of sustainable development, act of sustainability as basic principle of sustainable development. The three-pillar or triangle basic model of sustainability, what does it talks? When we look into the relation between nature and society, what we talk about development, you will see the development, what we are experiencing, its process, how it is happening, how it changes the world. You will see first two important components, that is nature, that is environment as resources, then other is society with the human. And to run the society, we utilize the resources from the environment and in a medium called economy. So, when we talk about sustainability, from where we get the resources, it is from the environment. For whom? For our society. How to make it this particular flow of resources that is through economy. So, we have to maintain these three important components as we call three-pillar basic model of sustainability. Whenever we talk about sustainable development, we should understand the basic relation of these three important components in nature-society relation. So, whenever you have a good quality of environment, you will have a good quality social life. When you have good quality social life, you will have good economy, and these are interrelated. this basic model can also look as a model. Nowadays we talk about moral imperatives of the citizens to bring sustainability. So you can look the 3 pillars in 3 ways again, that is satisfying human needs, means through the economy. Economic pillars can be looked at as satisfying the human needs. Then ensuring social equity, needs to have equality in the equity, and to have or to maintain the harmonious relation between environment and nature, we need to respect the environmental limits, that is respecting the environmental limits. So in this way, we can look this basic model. Another concept is cultural diversity as central pillars of sustainable development as a basic principle. So when we discuss about these 3 basic 3 pillars model, that is environment, then economy and society. When we discuss in that, we have seen that these are interrelated to each other. When there is some imbalance in one of the pillars, it has impact on other 2 pillars. It may be directly or indirectly. So discussing sustainable development, when we discuss this, it is critical to move beyond talking about the preservation of Earth's heritage and identities. Also include the broad civilization notion embodied in culture as a whole way of life, because it informs the underlying beliefs system, worldviews, epistemologies and cosmologies that shape international relation as well as human interaction with the environment. Because the relation you see, nature in a society is a culture. No, the notion of cultural activities, that is coming to that point, that if you look in the cultural civilization such as agriculture, agrarian civilization is one of the earliest uses of the word culture, and it also relates to the sustainable development issue that we talked in the last class also when we talk about sustainability. That sometimes we talk about some of the agricultural practices are deemed to be more eco-friendly than others on account of culturally informed patterns. For example, integrated farming, then that's are more efficient than your slash and urban agriculture. So the point is that your relation between nature and society is broad, economy is broad because of a culture. So culture should be taken as the 4th pillar of sustainability. The other key thing to note is that when it comes into sustainable development, you will see cultures are not equal from a region to another region. Some cultures are more equal than others, and depending on the political and historical context, you will see the difference. At one end of the sustainable development discourse in Western society, it is viewed as either as the cause or the solution to the problem. At the other end of the spectrum, traditional or localized, particularly non-Western knowledge is either seen as backward and problematic or romanticized as sacred wisdom and therefore valued for its future value. So that when we speak of the promotion of cultural identities, cultural pluralism, cultural industries, geocultures, etc., as key elements of the 4th pillar of sustainable development, and it refers to a need to redress global imbalance in cultural arena. So culture should be viewed not just an additional pillar of sustainable development along with environmental, economic and social objective, because people's identities, signifying system, cosmologies and epistemic frameworks have how the environment is viewed and how we live in. Culture shapes what we mean by development and determines how people act in the world. Then another principle, this is how this culture that shows, that's a pillar, okay. Then another principle proposed by World Bank in 1994, that is capital stock model. It talks about ecological capital and human social capital. What is ecological capital? Ecological capital are the planning process. In the planning process, now when you talk about ecological capital, the biodiversity, the landscape, mineral resources, clean air and healthy water. And when you talk about human and social capital, it is about health, social security, social cohesion, freedom, justice, equality of opportunities and peace. And that particular capital stock model proposed its equation, that is capital stock of the sustainable development is equal to summation of, that's capital stock of the environment, capital stock of the economy and capital stock of the society. that shows that your quality of the environment, your status of economy, then your status of society, that talks about health, social security, that reflect your sustainable development. That what was proposed by capitalist stock model. Then another model, principle, as more we call it as a model also, Acts of Sustainability by IUCN 1994. The Act of Sustainability illustrates the relation between people and ecosystem as one circle inside another, like yolk of an egg. That shows that whenever you have good quality of the yolk, okay, then albumin also have a good quality, that implies. This implies that people are within the ecosystem and that ultimately one is entirely dependent upon the other, just as an egg is good only if both the white and the yolk are good. So a society is well and sustainable only if both people, means society, and the ecosystem are well. So these are highly interrelated. Okay. So social and economic development can only be take place if the environment offers the necessary resources, that is raw material, space for new production sites and jobs, then constitutional qualities like recreation, health, etc. That means you need a good environment, good quality of environment, nature. So ecosystem is therefore to be regarded as a subordinated system to the other dimension of the triangle or prism model, that is social, economic, and institutional. These latter can only prosper if they adapt themselves to the limits of environment and carrying capacity. So another, what it says is that hypothesis of IUCN says that as a part of sustainability principle, sustainable development is, what is that? The summation, the addition of human well-being in ecosystem well-being. When you have good human well-being, that's why we talk about the human health status, social security, then ecosystem well-being, what kind of production. So you will come details in other chapter. So that is what proposed by the hypothesis of IUCN. So based on all these few of the principles proposed by different organizations and individuals, in short, during the past few years, as we know, number of exercises are being implemented by different government and NGOs towards sustainable development. Through the reformation of, we will see a number of national policies across the world by different nations and number of institutions, and strengthening the capacities of environment and bureaucracy, like we have Indian Forest Service and other, then Green Tribunal, NGT, National Green Tribunal, directing much greater level of funding and moreover emboldening international environment agreements and organizations than green industrial revolution like green technology, for example, biotechnology, information communication technology, and some of the summit like the Rio Earth Summit 1992 and World Summit on Sustainable Development are such global common efforts in bringing the sustainable development. That is happening during the last, especially after post-1973 Stockholm Conference, during the last 40 years. Then, what is the fundamental issues? We have an understanding that we need to maintain a harmonious relation between nature and society. Simultaneously, we need development because we need social security. So our biggest challenge in this new century is to take an idea that sounds abstract, sustainable development, and turn it into reality for all the world's people, unquote, quote and unquote, by Kofi Annan, United Nations General Secretary in 2001. That's reflected. The environment and sustainability involves harmonious relationship between action of human society and environment itself. As we know, it cannot be possible to solve by optimizing the environment and quality only. So we have to maintain the quality of three basic pillars. If we maintain those three basic pillars, others will also improve. It may be culture, it may be what, but we need to link, we need to understand that. But to make it a balanced, harmonious relation, what are the big challenges? The challenges is to innate elements of sustainable, far-sighted strategy to far-sighted thinking and action. These challenges, what are the key challenges in that? To enact those elements of sustainable of far-sighted strategy to far-sighted thinking and action, pure impatience. Humans are very impatient. We are, for example, whatever we want immediately. We don't think about waiting for another few years or something. We want result immediately. Then selfishness. We are very selfish. We think for ourselves only, or our own community, or our family only. Then very uncertainty, because whatever the approaches you are following, we sometimes feel that after short term, if we do not see the short term benefit, we will feel that we don't know after 20 years what will happen. So we look into that. Because of that uncertainty, we have the thinking of that towards orientation towards short term benefit. Then we have limited analytical capacity, because we never think about that. Repeatedly we are discussing about that we don't think about more distance benefit. After 25 years, what will happen? The vulnerability. These are the major obstacle, because vulnerability, for example, if a person wants to plant to follow the agroforestry in a region, we look into what after 15 years, whether any disease will come that will affect to this particular tree. So these are some of the thinking in our mind. These are the major challenges. Therefore, without understanding of the individual commitment, motivation and goal, it will be very difficult to move forward towards the human dream of sustainability. So the crucial challenge is either to get most of the people of the world thinking about sustainability, or to stimulate informed policy that creates structural solution so that sustainability itself may be advanced while people march mindlessly through their days. The gap in the knowledge in the human psychological understanding can be bridged through mass education. That is why UN declared 2004 to 2015 as UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development. Most of the leaders, great leaders like Professor M.S. Swaminathan in India, have defined a foundation upon which sustainable development can achieve. In his word, there is a need for a harmony with nature, which is a non-negotiable ethic. As well, it should focus to the 5 important E's, 5 E's. He explained that 5 E's is ecology, economy, energy, employment, and equity. So the roots of sustainable development should have pro-nature, pro-poor, pro-women orientation. So that reflects we have to balance. If we basically look into the basic principle, we have to balance the 3 important pillars under that the 4th one, culture, right? So this definition reflects all those 4 important. I am saying that not only the 3, that culture taken as also one of the important pillars that are reflected by focusing on 5 important E's: ecology, economy, energy, employment, and equity. Then, well-known Indian statesman academic like Dr. Karan Singh opined that the concept of sustainable development is only something that is invented in the West, and that we in the East really knew nothing about it. It is entirely wrong. They exist in our cultural heritage, and it shows quite clearly how important the environment and values are in our ethos. He again stresses us that sustainable development involves transformation of our own individual and collective behavior. Although environmental values are built into our ethos, we are not behaving in accordance with those environmental values, and in fact, we seem to be behaving in the exact opposite direction of what our cultural ethos on us. So, looking into what Professor Swaminathan in Indian context that is applicable to the entire world, then and exactly what Dr. Karan Singh opined. So, the point here is that you need to understand culture also. If you want to achieve sustainable development, you have to bring culture also, right? The take home point of today's class is, history and a basic concept and the principle of sustainable development was discussed. And what are the basic challenges to sustainable development was also discussed in brief. And that can be summarized as, there are several criticism on Brundtland report on our common future. You will find out a number of literature on that. But it is a watershed in thinking of environment, development, and governance by making it as a vital historical markers towards the survival of our very planet. You will see The issues of ethical consideration on human-environment relation, globalization, transdisciplinary modes of knowledge production, like you will see the ecological economics, subject like ecological economics, the plurality of approaches to development, etc. are giving attention to the international community. This evolving concept of development supports the opening up of local to global public spaces to debate and enact a politics of sustainability. Probably, it is only after Brundtland report that the special focus on the needs for future generation, and it also signals environment as an important facet of international governance in thinking and practice are being discussed through interdisciplinary approach. The foundation for a renewed intellectual, ethical and political commitment to sustainability is being provided. So, this is what we can summarize after going through the this discussion what we have talked today. Thanks all. These are the references which you can refer. Thanks.